Episode 1: The Shacktown Mystery. In the heart of the African wilderness, nestled between lush vegetation and expansive farmlands, stood a peculiar village known as Shacktown. The name alone sparked curiosity, for despite its nickname, the village was brimming with wealth, rich palm oil plantations, fields of cocoa, and thriving businesses. Yet, despite the abundance, the villagers lived in worn-out, fragile shacks made of palm fronds and mud. To any outsider, the sight of such wealth juxtaposed with poverty was bewildering. But Shacktown had its secrets. For decades, a dark myth had haunted the village. Anyone who dared to build a luxurious home, indulge in lavish living, or flaunt their wealth would suffer an untimely death. This chilling belief was so deeply ingrained that the villagers refused to question it. Many rich individuals in Shacktown met their demise between the ages of 35 and 55, their fate sealed by what everyone called the curse of Shacktown. Frightened by this myth, the villagers continued to live in their shacks, unwilling to tempt fate by enjoying the luxuries they had earned. The elders would often whisper to the younger generation, "Do not build a mansion. Do not drive a car. Do not live lavishly. If you do, the curse will find you." And so, for years, the village remained frozen in time, held hostage by its own fear. Among the villagers was a man named Fifi, a celebrated businessman whose palm kernel oil empire had made him one of the wealthiest men in Shacktown. Unlike the others, Fifi harbored a deep-seated belief that there had to be more to the story. He had seen his father, a wealthy farmer, die mysteriously at the age of 42 after building a grand home on the edge of the village. Since then, Fifi vowed never to live extravagantly. He lived in a modest shack, his wealth hidden away, known only to a few. Fifi had one daughter, Amina. Bright, curious, and unafraid, Amina often questioned the village's strange ways. "Father," she would ask, "how can a house or a car cause someone to die? What is it that kills them?" Fifi would sigh and shake his head, his heart heavy with the weight of tradition. "It is the curse, Amina. No one knows its origin, but we cannot challenge it. Many have tried and failed. If you value your life, do not tempt it." But Amina wasn't convinced. As she grew older, her thirst for knowledge only deepened. She had a sharp mind, always eager to learn, and was fascinated by the field of medicine. She had watched as villagers, both rich and poor, succumbed to the so-called curse, but something in her gut told her that there was a scientific explanation. It wasn't just superstition, there was more to it. Then came the day that would change the course of her life forever. Fifi, determined to give his daughter the best opportunities in life, made a bold decision. He approached the village council with a request that stunned them all. He intended to send Amina abroad to study medicine. The village was in shock. No one in Shacktown had ever left to study outside the village and returned. The fear of the unknown beyond the village borders kept most people rooted in Shacktown. "What you are asking is dangerous," warned one of the village elders. "No one who leaves this village ever comes back. Have you forgotten the fate of the chief's sons and daughters who left in search of answers? They never returned." Fifi stood his ground. "I will not let this village's fear hold my daughter back. Amina is brilliant. She will find the answers we seek, and perhaps she can even uncover the truth behind this curse." A ripple of murmurs swept through the gathering. The villagers were afraid for Amina, yet they couldn't help but be curious about what she might discover. Days before her departure, a solemn ceremony was held. Amina's picture, once hung proudly on the wall of residence, where every villager's photograph was displayed, was removed. It was a tradition in Shacktown. Whenever someone left the village, their picture was taken down, marking their departure from the life they once knew. For most, this was a permanent goodbye. On the day of her departure, the entire village gathered to bid her farewell. As Amina stood beside the old village gates, her father by her side, she looked out at the faces of her people. There was fear in their eyes, but also hope. She could sense it. She wasn't just leaving to study medicine. She was leaving to solve the mystery that had plagued Shacktown for generations. As the village gates creaked open, Amina turned to her father. "I will return, father," she promised, her voice steady with determination. "And when I do, I will break this curse." Fifi smiled, though his heart was heavy. "Go with courage, my daughter. May you find the answers we've all been too afraid to seek." With that, Amina stepped out of Shacktown and into the unknown. The journey was long and arduous, but Amina was relentless. She poured herself into her studies, excelling in her courses and making a name for herself as one of the brightest students in her program. For years, she researched tirelessly, determined to understand the mysterious deaths in her village. She studied diseases that caused sudden death, looked into environmental factors, and investigated genetics. But no matter how much she learned, the answers remained elusive. 11 years passed, and Amina was now a certified nurse with a deep understanding of medical science. She had worked in hospitals, treated patients with life-threatening conditions, and learned more than she ever thought possible. But the one question that had driven her from the beginning, the question of the Shacktown curse, still haunted her. One day, after a particularly long shift at the hospital, Amina sat down with her mentor, Dr. Makinde, an experienced physician known for his expertise in rare diseases. She shared the story of her village, the curse that had claimed the lives of so many wealthy individuals. Dr. Makinde listened intently, nodding as Amina spoke. When she finished, he leaned back in his chair, his eyes thoughtful. "Amina, what you describe sounds very much like a common condition I've seen among patients who live in isolated rural areas. It's not a curse, it's undiagnosed diabetes." Amina's heart raced. Could it be? Was it that simple? Dr. Makinda continued. "Diabetes, especially when left untreated, can lead to sudden drops in blood sugar. If people don't know they have the condition, they might mistake the symptoms for something else, like fatigue or drunkenness. If their blood sugar drops too low, it can lead to unconsciousness and eventually death. If what you say is true, your villagers are likely experiencing hypoglycemia." Amina sat in stunned silence. The curse wasn't a curse at all. It was a medical condition. Filled with a renewed sense of purpose, Amina knew she had to return to Shacktown. She had the answers now, and she was determined to share them with her people. The long-held superstition that had controlled their lives for decades was about to be shattered. As Amina boarded the plane to return home, she couldn't help but wonder how the villagers would react. Would they believe her? Would they embrace the truth? Or would they cling to the myth that had kept them in fear for so long? One thing was certain. Her return would change Shacktown forever. Episode 2. Whispers of a Curse. The night air in Shacktown was still and heavy. Fires flickered in clay pots outside the shacks, casting eerie shadows on the walls of the humble homes. The villagers sat quietly in small clusters, their faces reflecting the same unspoken fear that had governed their lives for decades. The curse had taken too many of their own, and they dared not speak of it openly. As the wind whispered through the palm trees, the elders of Shacktown gathered in the center of the village. Their faces were worn, lined with the weight of knowledge they had inherited from generations before them. They were the keepers of the village's dark secrets, the men who had witnessed the rise and fall of Shacktown's wealthiest souls, each brought to ruin by the mysterious force that seemed to punish any sign of prosperity. Elder Kofi, the oldest and most respected of the council, cleared his throat, drawing the attention of the group. His voice, though soft, held an authority that silenced the rest. "We have seen many generations come and go, but the curse has remained," he began, his words deliberate. "No one has dared to defy it and live." The others nodded in solemn agreement. They had seen it all, the tragedy of those who had dared to build larger homes, to adorn themselves in gold, and to live lavishly. They had watched as one by one, the wealthy of Shacktown met their untimely deaths, each more tragic than the last. There was Tano, the cocoa merchant, who built the grandest home in Shacktown, only to be found dead in his bed on his 45th birthday. Then there was Madame Ekwa, who had opened the village's first clothing store. She was a beacon of success, admired by all, until her body was discovered cold and lifeless after a grand feast celebrating her 50th year. And then there was Kwaku, who had saved for years to buy a luxury cart. His death at the age of 38 was sudden and unexplained. These stories, and many others like them, were carved into the memories of Shacktown's residents. The curse was real to them, a terrifying force that had to be respected. No one dared question it, not even the wealthiest traders who lived with the constant fear of crossing that invisible line between survival and doom. Elder Kofi, spoke up one of the younger councilmen, a man named Kojo. Do you believe the girl, Amina, will survive? She has left our village, traveled beyond our borders. No one ever returns from such a journey. Kofi stroked his beard thoughtfully. Amina is different, he said slowly. She is not like the others who left in fear, seeking to escape Shacktown's curse. She left to understand it, to fight it. But no one who leaves ever returns, another elder, Nana, interjected. Her picture was taken down from the village wall. She is as good as lost. There was a long silence as the elders reflected on the countless others who had left Shacktown, seeking answers to the curse or merely fleeing its reach. None had returned. Their faces had been removed from the wall of residence, their existence in the village wiped away as if they had never been born. Amina's picture had been taken down the day she left. The villagers had mourned her departure, not because they expected her to die, but because they knew that leaving Shacktown meant severing ties forever. Yet Fifi, her father, had held on to hope, believing that his daughter's quest would bring an end to the village's curse. Meanwhile, far from the darkened alleys of Shacktown, Amina's life was taking a different shape. In the cold lecture halls of her medical school, she was immersed in her studies, pushing herself to excel beyond expectation. Each night, she would think of Shacktown, its people, its secrets, and the curse that plagued her home. Her desire to understand the mysterious deaths drove her forward, fueling her determination to uncover the truth. One evening, while poring over medical journals, she stumbled upon something that made her pause. A case study on diabetes, a condition that had been misdiagnosed in a rural community, much like her own, caught her eye. The symptoms described, sudden death, unconsciousness, and fatigue, were eerily similar to the deaths in Shacktown. Her heart raced as she read further, her mind beginning to piece together a theory. Could it be that the curse was not supernatural at all, but something far more manageable? Could it be that the people of Shacktown had been dying from an undiagnosed disease? Back in Shacktown, life continued as it always had. The villagers tended to their crops, sold their wares, and kept their heads low. No one dared aspire for more than the simple life. The myth of the curse loomed large over their lives, keeping them confined to their shacks, content with just surviving. But there were always whispers, whispers of those who had left, whispers of those who had died, and whispers of the curse itself. The elders were especially careful, ensuring that the fear stayed alive in the minds of the villagers. They believed it was this fear that kept them safe from the curse's wrath. Let us not forget, Elder Kofi said, his voice breaking through the stillness of the night, that this curse has been with us for generations. We must never be tempted to defy it. But what if there is more to it than we know? Kojo asked, his curiosity tinged with fear. What if Amina returns with answers? If she returns, Kofi replied gravely, then we shall know. But until then, we must continue as we have always done. As the meeting dispersed and the elders returned to their homes, the silence of the night grew louder. Shacktown's fear of the curse was deep, but the winds were shifting. Somewhere, far beyond the village, Amina was on the verge of a discovery that could change everything. But for now, the villagers were left with only the whispers of a curse that had shaped their lives for as long as anyone could remember. Episode 3: A Return Against All Odds. The sky over Shacktown was painted a soft orange as the sun began to dip behind the hills. The villagers, as usual, went about their evening tasks, cooking over open fires, mending fishing nets, and gathering around to exchange stories of their day. Yet tonight, there was an unease in the air, a rumble, a murmur, something different from the quiet dread that usually lingered in the village. The whispers were not of the curse, but of a shocking and improbable event that no one thought possible. It began with a lone figure approaching Shacktown's borders, her silhouette framed against the fading sunlight. At first, the villagers dismissed it as another traveler from the neighboring towns, one of the many merchants or traders who passed through occasionally. But as the figure came closer, a few gasps rang out from the crowd. The figure's posture, her walk, her confidence, there was something disturbingly familiar about it. It wasn't long before someone called out in disbelief, "Is that Amina?" Fifi, who was sitting quietly outside his shack, turned his head sharply at the sound of his daughter's name. His heart began to race, a mixture of hope and disbelief stirring in his chest. He pushed himself up, his eyes narrowing to make out the distant figure. And then there was no mistaking it. "Amina has returned!" one of the women shouted, her voice cutting through the still evening air. A collective murmur rippled through the village. The villagers had seen many things in their lives, tragedy, wealth, loss, but nothing had prepared them for the return of someone they thought was lost forever. Amina had been gone for over a decade. No one who left Shacktown ever came back. That was the way of things. That was how the curse worked. Fifi's legs felt weak as he stood, his hands trembling. The old man was filled with so many emotions that he could barely keep his thoughts straight. How was this possible? Had his daughter truly returned? Or was this some trick of the spirits? The crowd parted as the figure drew near, and there, standing tall with a proud but gentle smile, was Amina. Her face was the same as the villagers remembered, though now there was a maturity and grace to her that had not been there before. She was no longer the eager young girl who had left Shacktown. She had grown into a confident woman, with the air of someone who had seen the world and returned with answers. "Amina, is it really you?" Fifi's voice cracked as he stepped forward, his eyes brimming with tears. "It's me, father," she replied softly, stepping into his embrace. "I've come back, just as I promised." Fifi held her tightly, his heart nearly bursting with joy. Around them, the villagers stood frozen in shock. Some murmured to each other, exchanging skeptical glances, while others openly wept at the sight of her. The impossible had happened. Amina had returned. "Praise the gods," someone whispered, but others were less certain. "She survived? How? No one ever survives once they leave," another villager muttered. As Fifi held his daughter, his joy was clouded by a lingering fear. He had watched many of his friends, wealthy, successful, and full of life, meet untimely deaths because they defied the curse. Would Amina suffer the same fate? He glanced at her face, searching for any sign of impending doom, but saw only determination. That evening, the entire village gathered at the concert arena, a humble open space surrounded by shacks and palm trees. The air was thick with anticipation, disbelief, and a trace of hope. Amina stood before them, her heart pounding as she looked into the eyes of the people she had missed for so long. She knew this moment would come. She had prepared for it all these years, but now that she was here, standing on the very soil she had left behind, it all felt so much more real. "People of Shacktown," Amina began, her voice strong and clear, "I promised you all that I would return. I promised my father that I would return, and here I am, alive and well." The crowd stirred. Some villagers nodded, while others exchanged nervous glances. They had been conditioned to believe that anyone who lived luxuriously or left the village would never survive. The sight of Amina standing before them, untouched by the curse, shook the very foundation of their beliefs. I know you are all wondering how I survived, she continued, her gaze sweeping over the crowd. You have lived in fear for so long, fear of a curse that has claimed the lives of so many. But what if I told you that this curse is not what you think? The villagers leaned in, their curiosity piqued. Amina had always been smart, always questioning things that others accepted without hesitation. But to suggest that the curse was something other than what they had believed for generations, that was a bold claim, one that many were not ready to hear. Amina, do not tempt fate, Elder Kofi spoke from the front row, his voice filled with caution. We have seen too much death to doubt the power of the curse. I understand your fear, Elder, Amina replied respectfully. But I have spent the last 11 years studying medicine, and I have learned many things. I believe that what we have been calling a curse is something else entirely, something we can understand, and more importantly, something we can cure. The murmurs in the crowd grew louder. Some villagers looked hopeful, while others shook their heads in disbelief. How can this be? One man called out. We have seen people die. We have watched as our wealthiest brothers and sisters have been taken from us too soon. Are you saying that was not the work of the curse? I am saying, Amina continued, that there may be a different explanation. I ask you to trust me. I have come back to help you, to save Shacktown from this fate. But first, you must listen. Her words were met with both skepticism and cautious hope. The villagers had lived under the shadow of the curse for so long that the idea of breaking free from it seemed impossible. Yet here was Amina, a living contradiction to everything they had been taught. The celebration that followed Amina's speech was bittersweet. While many rejoiced at her return, others whispered doubts and fears. The elders were especially wary, their decades of belief in the curse too deeply ingrained to let go of so easily. As the night wore on, the villagers danced and sang, but an undercurrent of tension remained. Could Amina truly be the one to save them from the curse? Or would she, like so many before her, succumb to the same fate? Amina knew that the hardest part of her journey was yet to come. The villagers were not ready to hear the truth, but she had returned to change their lives, to free them from the fear that had shackled them for so long. Tomorrow, she would reveal what she had discovered during her years away. Tomorrow, the real battle would begin. Episode 4. The Diagnosis. The morning sun cast a golden glow over Shacktown, but despite the beauty of the dawn, a heavy tension loomed. Word of Amina's return had spread like wildfire, and the villagers gathered around the village square with a mix of excitement, skepticism, and fear. The promise of breaking the curse had sent waves through the tightly knit community. Some were hopeful, while others were more hesitant. Could this young woman, gone for over a decade, truly understand what had plagued Shacktown for generations? Amina stood in the center of the square, surrounded by a growing crowd. She had requested a meeting with the village elders, the chiefs, and all the prominent families. The anticipation was palpable as the villagers jostled for a view of her. A wooden table stood beside her, its surface covered with strange instruments and items that most villagers had never seen before. Small vials, flex pen insulins, and a metallic device. Elder Kofi, the oldest of the village council, stepped forward, his brow furrowed. Amina, he began, his voice carrying the weight of generations of Shacktown tradition. We are here because you promised us answers. You have returned against all odds, and for that we are grateful. But we have lived under the shadow of this curse for many years. What is it that you have to tell us? Amina's gaze swept across the crowd, her heart pounding. This was the moment she had been preparing for, the moment that would change everything. She had returned not just to confront the curse, but to dispel it. She took a deep breath and began. I know that many of you still believe in the curse, she said, her voice steady. You have seen your wealthiest brothers and sisters die young, leaving behind riches that turned to dust in their absence. But I am here to tell you that what we have been calling a curse is, in fact, something else entirely. It is not magic. It is not a punishment from the gods. It is a disease. A collective gasp rose from the crowd. A disease? The word felt foreign to many of them, something distant, something that belonged in books or cities far away from their simple village. The villagers exchanged nervous glances. Elder Kofi's frown deepened, but he remained silent, waiting for her to continue. This disease, Amina continued, picking up one of the vials from the table, is called diabetes. The word hung in the air, unfamiliar and strange. The villagers murmured among themselves, confused. Diabetes? One of the villagers, Ni, called out. What is that? How can it kill our people? Amina turned to the crowd, her face serious but calm. Diabetes is a condition that affects the way the body processes sugar. When someone has diabetes, their body cannot properly regulate their blood sugar levels, which can lead to serious health problems over time. It is especially dangerous when it goes undiagnosed and untreated, which is what has been happening in Shacktown. She reached for the metallic device, holding it up for everyone to see. This is a blood sugar tester. It helps to measure the amount of sugar in your blood. High levels of sugar over time can cause damage to the heart, kidneys, and other vital organs, leading to early death. The symptoms of diabetes, such as fatigue, excessive thirst, and weight loss, are the same symptoms many of the wealthy villagers who died experienced. They were not cursed, they were suffering from diabetes. The crowd erupted in murmurs again, some villagers nodding in recognition of the symptoms she described, but others remained unconvinced. One of the elders, Nana Akosua, spoke up, her voice laced with skepticism. And how do you know this, Amina? We have lived with this curse for generations. Are you saying that all of our ancestors who died were simply sick? I understand that this is difficult to believe, Amina replied, her voice gentle but firm. But I have seen this disease in other places. I studied it while I was abroad. In cities, in hospitals, I saw people diagnosed with diabetes. And with the right treatment, they lived long and healthy lives. What we've been calling a curse is preventable and treatable. She turned to her table and picked up a flex pen insulin. This is insulin. It is a medicine that helps people with diabetes control their blood sugar levels. With this, we can save lives. At the mention of the flex pen insulin, a ripple of fear passed through the crowd. The villagers had never seen such a tool, and the sight of the needle was unnerving. One of the men in the front row, Kwame, took a step back, his face filled with apprehension. So you're saying that all we need is this insulin? He asked, his voice shaking. And the deaths will stop? Amina nodded. Yes, but it's not just about insulin. It's also about diet and lifestyle changes. We need to monitor our sugar intake and take care of our bodies. If we do this, we can prevent the deaths that have plagued this village for so long. Elder Kofi, who had remained silent until now, stepped forward, his face dark with doubt. And what if you are wrong, Amina? What if this curse is more than just a disease? You are asking us to abandon everything we have believed in for generations. Amina met his gaze, unflinching. I am not asking you to abandon your beliefs. I am asking you to save your lives. This disease doesn't care about wealth or status. It has affected the richest among us because they have access to more sugar, more food, more indulgence. But this disease can be fought. A tense silence followed her words. The villagers were torn between their belief in the curse that had dominated their lives and the hope that perhaps, just perhaps, there was another explanation. But the air was thick with resistance. Years of tradition and superstition were not so easily shaken. Suddenly, a voice broke the silence. I don't believe her. The voice belonged to Kwasi, one of the wealthier men in the village. He stepped forward, his arms crossed, defiance clear in his posture. My father died from the curse, my grandfather before him. This is not some sickness from the city. This is our village's fate. We've lived with it, and we will die with it. I don't need your medicine." The crowd buzzed with unease as Kwasi's words spread. Some villagers nodded in agreement, their fear outweighing their hope. Others looked torn, unsure of who to believe. Amina's heart sank. She knew there would be resistance, but seeing it in front of her was harder than she had imagined. Still, she refused to back down. "Kwasi, I understand your fear," Amina said, stepping toward him. "But please, let me test your blood sugar. It will only take a moment, and it could save your life." Kwasi shook his head stubbornly. "Number, I don't need your tests. I will not defy the curse." Before Amina could respond, another voice called out. This time, a woman, Ajoa, who had lost her husband to the so-called curse years ago. "Let her test me," she said, stepping forward. "I have lost too much to this curse. If Amina is right, I want to know." Amina smiled gratefully at Ajoa and gestured for her to sit at the table. She carefully pricked Ajoa's finger with the device and tested her blood sugar. The result flashed on the device, dangerously high. "Ajoa," Amina said softly, "you are diabetic." The crowd gasped. Ajoa looked shocked but grateful. "And what now?" she asked. Amina held up the flex pen insulin. "Now, we begin treatment." As Amina administered the insulin to Ajoa, the crowd watched with bated breath. A ripple of hope spread through the square, but it was tempered by fear. The villagers had seen death claim too many of their own, but now, for the first time, there was the possibility of something different. As the sun set over Shacktown, the village was left with more questions than answers. The curse was not gone, not yet, but perhaps, just perhaps, they were one step closer to understanding it. But not everyone was ready to accept this new reality. Kwasi, still unconvinced, walked away from the crowd, his fate uncertain. Episode 5. Breaking the Curse. The morning after Amina's revelation hung heavy in the air of Shacktown. The village, which had been buzzing with cautious hope, now faced an unsettling tension. Whispers filled the streets, each villager grappling with the truth Amina had laid bare. Could it be true? Was the curse merely a guise for a disease that could be diagnosed and treated? Amina stood outside her temporary clinic, a modest hut she had set up upon her return. Inside, the walls were adorned with posters of healthy food choices, diagrams explaining diabetes, and hopeful messages about managing health. She was determined to change the narrative that had haunted Shacktown for generations. Ajoa had spent the night under Amina's care, receiving her first dose of insulin. Her initial shock had transformed into a cautious optimism as she began to feel the effects of the medicine. As she stepped out of the clinic, she felt lighter, her body invigorated with hope. "Good morning, Amina," Ajoa called, a smile lighting up her face. "I can't believe how different I feel already." Amina returned the smile, but her heart was heavy with the weight of the work ahead. "That's wonderful to hear, Ajoa, but we have a long way to go. I want to teach you how to manage your diabetes so you can stay healthy." The day progressed with a steady stream of villagers coming to Amina's clinic. Some were skeptical, and a few were outright hostile, but the word was slowly spreading. Ajoa's experience was beginning to turn the tide. Amina demonstrated how to use the blood sugar tester and explained the importance of diet and exercise. "Remember," she said, demonstrating again with Ajoa by her side, "it's not just about insulin. It's about understanding your body and how to nourish it." As the sun climbed higher, more villagers gathered, hesitant but intrigued. They watched as Amina tended to each patient with care, her passion igniting a spark of curiosity. However, a familiar face remained absent. Kwasi, the skeptic who had openly rejected Amina's diagnosis, had not been seen since the meeting. As the afternoon wore on, Amina noticed an uneasy stillness in the air. Villagers began to whisper more intently, their gaze shifting toward the village's outskirts. "Did you hear? Kwasi's brother collapsed," someone exclaimed, panic creeping into their voice. "Not again," another murmured. "Is it the curse?" Amina felt a knot tighten in her stomach. We need to go check on him, she said, turning to Ajoa. Gather everyone. We need to help. They rushed toward Kwasi's home, and as they approached, a crowd had already gathered. The mood was somber, with hushed whispers filling the air. Amina pushed through the throng of onlookers to find Kwasi kneeling by his brother Kofi, who lay unconscious on the ground. Get back! Kwasi shouted, tears streaming down his face. Get away from him! This is a curse! You've brought this upon us! Amina stepped forward, her heart racing. Kwasi, I can help him. Please let me. No! He shouted, his voice breaking. You're lying! This is the curse that kills! Ignoring his protests, Amina knelt beside Kofi. She checked his pulse and realized it was weak. She pulled out her blood sugar tester and pricked Kofi's finger, desperation urging her actions. The reading was dangerously low. He's hypoglycemic, Amina called out, urgency filling her voice. He needs sugar immediately. Kwasi's eyes widened in disbelief. What are you talking about? He's cursed. Ignoring his words, Amina instructed Ajoa to fetch some sugar and water from the crowd. As Ajoa hurried away, Amina remained focused on Kofi, her hands shaking but steady. She could feel the weight of the villagers' gazes on her, their fears and doubts pressing down like a heavy blanket. When Ajoa returned with the sugar, Amina mixed it with water and poured the concoction into Kofi's mouth. Time stretched painfully as they waited, the crowd's whispers growing more anxious. What if she's wrong? Someone murmured. What if he dies? But finally, after what felt like an eternity, Kofi began to stir. His eyelids fluttered open, confusion washing over his face as he took in the concerned faces around him. Once he regained his strength, Nurse Amina quickly administered glucose to boost his sugar levels faster, ensuring he was out of danger. Brother! Kwasi exclaimed, falling to his side. Are you all right? Kofi blinked, the fog of unconsciousness slowly lifting. What happened? I don't know. I felt so weak. Amina sighed in relief but knew they were not out of danger yet. You have diabetes, Kofi. You must take care of yourself, or this could happen again. Kwasi's face turned pale, disbelief etched across his features. No, it can't be. You're lying. This is not possible. Amina stood up, meeting Kwasi's gaze with unwavering determination. I'm not lying, Kwasi. This is real, and your brother needs help. He is not cursed. He is sick. As the reality of the situation began to sink in, the murmurs of the crowd shifted. The skepticism was still there, but cracks were forming in the armor of disbelief. Ajoa stepped forward, her voice steady. I was in the same position, Kwasi. Amina saved me. You must listen to her. Kwasi's expression faltered as he looked at his brother, who was slowly regaining his strength. Kofi coughed and sat up, looking bewildered. I'm all right, I think. But what is this about diabetes? Amina moved closer, her voice gentle but firm. Kofi, your body isn't managing sugar properly. You need to monitor your levels and take insulin. If you do, you can live a long life. The curse has kept you in the dark for too long. The crowd watched in silence as the brothers exchanged glances. Kwasi's hardened expression began to crack, fear and hope battling within him. But what if it doesn't work? What if this is all a lie? Then I will take responsibility, Amina replied, her heart pounding. I am here to help you, but you must let me. After a long pause, Kwasi finally nodded, his shoulders slumping in defeat. All right, Amina, I'll trust you, but you have to prove it. The crowd erupted into a mixture of murmurs and gasps, some nodding in agreement, while others still held tight to their skepticism. But Amina felt a shift in the air, a glimmer of hope beginning to sprout amidst the fear. Gather everyone tonight for a meeting at the square, Amina called out, her voice rising above the chatter. I will demonstrate how to manage diabetes. Together, we can break this curse once and for all. As the crowd dispersed, Amina felt a flicker of triumph. The battle was far from over, but with Kofi's experience, she had turned a corner. If she could reach even a fraction of the villagers, she could make a difference. As night fell over Shacktown, lanterns lit the village square, casting a warm glow that dispelled the darkness. Villagers gathered in hushed anticipation, each of them weighing the fears of their past against the hope of a new future. Amina stood before them, her heart racing with a mix of nerves and determination. She was ready to fight for her village, to confront the myths that had bound them for too long. "Tonight," she began, "we face the truth together. No more curses, only understanding and a path toward healing." Episode 6. The Hero of Shacktown. The sun rose over Shacktown, casting a golden hue across the village. For the first time in years, there was a palpable sense of hope in the air. Amina had faced numerous challenges since her return, but the support she had garnered from villagers began to weave a new tapestry of resilience. The whispers of the curse had faded, replaced by a collective desire to embrace knowledge and change. In the village square, the atmosphere buzzed with excitement. The makeshift stage was adorned with colorful banners that read, "Breaking the Curse" and "Health is Wealth." Children ran about, their laughter mingling with the vibrant energy of the adults preparing for the meeting. Amina stood at the center, her heart swelling with pride and determination. "Today, we celebrate progress," she declared, her voice ringing out over the crowd. "We are not just breaking the curse, we are building a healthier future for ourselves and our children." As the villagers gathered, Amina felt a rush of gratitude for those who had believed in her from the start. Ajoa was there, her face beaming with vitality, a testament to the positive changes that had begun to take root. "Are you ready for this?" Ajoa asked, nudging Amina gently. "More than ready," Amina replied, taking a deep breath. "This is just the beginning." The meeting commenced with Amina introducing key concepts about diabetes management. She spoke passionately about the importance of regular blood sugar testing, a balanced diet, and the role of insulin in maintaining health. She also invited Kofi to share his experience, encouraging the villagers to ask questions. As Kofi stepped forward, the crowd grew silent, their attention fixed on him. "I never believed in what Amina was saying," he admitted, his voice steady. "But when I fell ill, she was there for me. I was given a second chance at life, and I owe it to her." The villagers listened intently, some nodding in agreement, while others appeared skeptical, still clinging to remnants of doubt. Amina knew the journey would not be easy. The shadows of superstition would take time to dispel. Suddenly, an elderly man in the back spoke up, his voice raspy but clear. "Amina, what if it doesn't work for everyone? What if we still lose more of our loved ones?" Amina felt the weight of his words pressing down on her. "I cannot promise that there will never be loss," she replied carefully. "But I can promise that knowledge and proper care can save lives. We need to unite as a community to support each other." The murmurs began to shift from skepticism to understanding. Slowly, the villagers started to see Amina not just as a daughter returning from abroad, but as a beacon of hope in their lives. "Let's create a health committee," Ajoa suggested, raising her hand. "We can help spread Amina's teachings to everyone in the village and ensure that no one is left behind." "Great idea," Kofi added, his voice growing stronger. "Together, we can monitor our health and make sure everyone understands how to take care of themselves." With newfound determination, the villagers rallied together, their spirits ignited by Amina's unwavering resolve. They discussed strategies for regular health workshops, nutrition education, and creating support groups for those living with diabetes. Each idea was met with enthusiasm, and a sense of community began to blossom in the square. As the sun began to set, Amina took a moment to observe the scene before her. The once skeptical faces of her neighbors were now filled with hope and determination. It was a sight she would never forget. She turned to Ajoa, her heart full. "Thank you for believing in this." "I always knew you had it in you," Ajoa replied, her eyes sparkling with excitement. "You're not just Amina anymore. You're our nurse, our leader, and our hero." Amina smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her. But even as she celebrated the moment, A small part of her remained vigilant. There was still much work to be done, and old habits would take time to change. As the meeting concluded, villagers began to disperse, energized by their discussions. They made plans to meet regularly, and Amina felt a sense of satisfaction wash over her. Perhaps the curse was truly being broken, one conversation at a time. Days turned into weeks, and the momentum Amina had built began to ripple through Shacktown. More villagers came to her clinic, eager to learn about managing diabetes. The health committee worked tirelessly, and the once silent streets buzzed with laughter and conversation. Amina watched as neighbors shared recipes for healthier meals and tips on how to stay active. But as the village transformed, shadows of doubt still lingered. Some elders clung to their beliefs, viewing Amina's teachings as an affront to their traditions. One evening, while she was closing up her clinic, she was approached by a group of older villagers, their faces etched with concern. "Amina," one elder began, his voice heavy with gravity, "we've been hearing stories that your methods may not be as effective as you claim. Some are saying it's still the curse taking its toll." A surge of frustration threatened to overwhelm Amina. "Elders, I understand your fears, but please listen to those who have benefited from this knowledge. We can't let superstition dictate our lives anymore." The elder shook his head, and the tension in the air thickened. "We respect your education, but we also hold our beliefs dear. You must understand that some of us are not ready to abandon what we've known." Amina felt the weight of the villagers' expectations pressing down on her. "But we're losing lives. We can't afford to cling to myths that no longer serve us." The elder's gaze softened slightly, but his resolve remained firm. "Perhaps it will take more than words to change our minds. Show us proof, Amina. Show us that your methods can truly save us." Amina took a deep breath, realizing the challenge ahead. She needed to bring the community together to confront their fears, not with words alone, but through actions that would resonate deeply. "Very well," she replied, her voice steady. "I will organize a health fair where we can showcase the benefits of diabetes management. Let's make it a community event, a celebration of knowledge and health." The preparations began in earnest, with villagers volunteering to help set up stalls, share recipes, and create informational booths. Amina envisioned a vibrant gathering where everyone could see firsthand the power of community and knowledge. On the day of the health fair, the village square transformed into a lively hub of activity. Colorful banners waved in the gentle breeze, and the air was filled with the aromas of healthy dishes prepared by the villagers. Children played games, while adults engaged in conversations about nutrition and wellness. Amina moved through the crowd, her heart swelling with pride. She observed Kofi and Ajoa leading workshops, demonstrating how to test blood sugar levels and administer insulin. The energy in the square was infectious, and even the most skeptical villagers began to engage. As the sun began to set, Amina stood at the center of the square, her heart racing with anticipation. "Thank you all for being here today," she called out, her voice clear and confident. "Today, we take a step together toward a brighter future. Together we can break the curse." Cheers erupted from the crowd, a chorus of hope that resonated throughout Shacktown. In that moment, Amina realized that she had not only become a nurse, she had become a catalyst for change. The village that had once been shrouded in fear was now stepping boldly into the light, ready to embrace a future filled with possibility. As the celebration continued, Amina caught sight of the elder from earlier. He was engaged in conversation with Kofi, his demeanor softer, more open. Perhaps change was happening, one heart at a time. Amina smiled to herself, knowing that her journey had only just begun. Shacktown was on the brink of transformation, and she was determined to guide them every step of the way. Episode 7: Shadows of the Past. The sun rises over Shacktown, illuminating a village transformed by Amina's efforts. The streets are bustling with life, laughter, and newfound hope. yet an unsettling feeling hangs in the air. As the villagers celebrate their freedom from the curse, whispers of an unexplained illness begin to spread, targeting not just the wealthy, but everyone in Shacktown. One morning, as Amina conducts her routine health checks at the community center, an elderly woman named Mama Kofi arrives, trembling and pale. "Nurse Amina, something is wrong with my family," she whispers, her voice quivering with fear. Amina, sensing the urgency, quickly gathers her supplies and follows Mama Kofi to her home. When they arrive, Amina finds Mama Kofi's son, Kojo, barely conscious, suffering from an unknown ailment. "He was fine yesterday," Mama Kofi cries, her eyes filled with desperation. Amina checks Kojo's vitals, but the readings reveal nothing conclusive. As she administers care, she can't shake the feeling that something sinister is at play. Amina decides to investigate further and gathers the village elders for an emergency meeting. The elders, still adjusting to the changes Amina has brought, express their skepticism. "Could this be another curse?" one elder suggests, sparking unease among the villagers. Determined to get to the bottom of the mystery, Amina begins to interview other families in Shacktown. Strikingly, she discovers that several others are experiencing similar symptoms, each case presenting a different set of alarming signs. "It's like a dark cloud is hovering over us again," one villager remarks, casting doubt on the village's newfound peace. As the week progresses, the number of affected villagers grows, and fear begins to creep back into Shacktown. Amina organizes a community meeting to address the rising concerns, but tension mounts as skepticism clashes with desperation. "This is not a curse, it's a health issue we can solve," Amina asserts, but her words are met with mixed reactions. Late one night, Amina receives an anonymous note slipped under her door, warning her to stop her investigations. "Leave the past buried, or you will regret it," it reads ominously. A shiver runs down her spine as she realizes that the shadows of Shacktown may hold darker truths than she anticipated. The episode culminates in a climactic scene where Amina, fueled by determination, resolves to uncover the root cause of the illness. With a newfound sense of urgency, she gathers her medical team and prepares to conduct a thorough investigation, determined to protect her village from whatever unseen danger looms. As the screen fades to black, viewers are left questioning, what lies in the shadows of Shacktown? Is the curse truly broken, or is there a more insidious threat waiting to resurface? To be continued.